Welcome to episode 74 of the XRM Toolcast. In this episode, Scott and I speak to three-time guest Mark Carrington about the changes he's made to the SQL for CDS tool for the XRM Toolbox, and how it's not only for the XRM Toolbox now. He also has a whole list of other things he's been working on, a very impressive list. So if you are wanting to use SQL against CRM from other applications and maybe as an ADO provider, this is definitely the episode for you to check out. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XRM Toolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott. I'm not allergic to duck eggs, Duro, at least not that we know of. Scott, how's it going?
I'm not allergic to what?
Duck eggs.
Duck eggs, no.
I'm assuming you're not. Most people aren't, but I found out that I was.
No, I definitely not. I don't think I'm allergic to any eggs, to be honest.
Yes.
Ducks or otherwise. Yeah.
I have a neighbor that has a duck, and he's allergic to chickens, but they have chickens, and the rest of his family eats the chickens, and he has some ducks, and he has duck eggs. And my wife made me this wonderful omelet last week, and it did horrible things to me. And then the next week they made this wonderful, delicious loaf of bread and had that, and again, horrible things to me. And it's like, did you put duck eggs in that bread? Yep. Oh, okay, cool. So I will never eat duck eggs as long as
I can't say I actually think I ever had a duck egg. So maybe I am. Maybe I didn't know that there was a possibility. Now I'm slightly nervous about having different kind of eggs. I think I've had quail eggs before. We had some chickens, so we kept chickens for a while, which was rather nice. I actually turned my computer on this morning, and my daughter had been using it, and the whole screen was covered in little cute chickens, little yellow chicks that she'd kindly placed all over my screen. So that was very
physically on the outside of it, not like on the virtual desktop or something.
No, it was a desktop. Okay. Yes.
All right, I was like, what is she doing to put virtual chickens all over your screen? That sounds kind of funny. It's like something my daughter would do.
Just sticking them to the outside of my screen. Yeah, that would. I'm very particular about people touching my screen, so that would really trigger me if anyone, it's actually put like greasy chicken marks on the top outside of my screen.
Yeah. We have 12 chickens now in our house. Little chicks. So they're a few weeks old, and soon we'll be outside in our chicken coop, and we'll be chicken farmers, I guess. So.
Yeah. Well, you may get some boy chickens, of course. So then
we will see. We will give them away or find a different home for those. But
our next door neighbor had a supposedly a chicken, but actually they found out that it was a he, and then they found out, of course, because it started being very vocal, much to everyone's displeasure, and so yes, it eventually went to stay with grandma.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're not really sure what going to stay with grandma is. It sounds a bit ominous, So if anyone says, "Are you ready to go to stay with grandma?" all the kids get a little bit nervous,
Well, we've covered the chicken and duck egg of the section of our podcast, and somehow that's actually to the reason we have a podcast.
Expand it into any other livestock that perhaps people are interested in.
Well, who knows?
Animal husbandry in general, that could be the whole section.
Yes. So our guest today is a repeat guest here, a chief technologist at Data 8 Limited, and Microsoft Business MVP, a dad, and a big kid, Mr. Mark Carrington. Mark, how's it going?
Hi, Daryl. Hi, Scott. How you doing?
Great to have you back, Mark.
Apart from not being very well with duck eggs.
Yes. The good thing is that once everything goes through, like a couple hours, and everything's fine. But up to that point, it's not fun.
Yeah. Too much information. Yeah.
As you were saying that, I thought Scott looks like a quail egg sort of person. Apparently, he is.
Oh, interesting.
You look like a quail egg person.
There's a whole lot of stuff we could unpack there, but probably we don't have the time nor people wouldn't be interested. But I feel like if I would kind of have to wax my like a moustache into a sort of a long curly moustache to be a quail egg person. But
full pro.
That's right. Yeah, the Poirot. Actually, I did watch the new Death on the Nile recently. Yeah. It's really awesome. I really enjoyed that. Anyway, we're getting distracted again. So yes, we're here to talk about far more important things.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Mark, you pinged me and said, "Hey, I've made some updates to my tool, the SQL for CDS tool for the XRM Toolbox, and it sounds like it's kind of broken out of its mold and it has grown into something bigger than just an XRM Toolbox tool. So, I thought that'd be real cool to talk through. The other thing, I'll just give a shout out to it, as I tweeted about this, I think a week or two ago. I needed to update. I need to disable all the plugins in an environment, and there's no good way of doing that outside of like writing C# code. I was like, oh wait, I can use SQL for CDS, and so I was able to write a little script and do that and share that with the world. So very, very helpful tool for those that know SQL. And if you don't know SQL, you may know someone that does, and they may be able to give you whatever little script you need in order to do what you need to do. So hopefully, even if you're not a SQL dev type of person, you can still find some of the show interesting. So Mark, take it away. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks. I think SQL for CDS has been around since, I think it was 2019. I've released the first version now. I think it's the third time I've been on here now talking about different things about it. So thank you very much. So I think about October last year, I put out some stuff on social media sort of saying, well, what do people want to see next in the tool? Gave a few options on there. First one was doing queries across different instances. So you could say compare data or copy data between a UAT and a prod environment, for example. So that was the one most people wanted. So I got that one out around about Christmas time, I think. So that was pretty cool. Latest one I've been working on since about January then was doing things like loops and variables, so you can make much more scripts really rather than just running one-off queries. I think that's actually inspired, Scott, by something you mentioned last time I was on to say, can you do the equivalent of a C# deep insert, so where you add maybe an account and some contacts along with it. At the time you couldn't, but it's one of those things that kind of sticks in your head and thinks, oh, I'm sure we could do something about that, and because we've got nothing else better to do, I start working on that. So so you can do that sort of thing now. So you can say add an account, add a bunch of contacts to it, make sure the contacts are linked to the accounts, pick one of those contacts, make it the primary contact, do all that in one script now. So you can say capture the ID of the account you've just created and make sure you use that when you're adding the contacts, things like that. It's quite useful for creating test data. So you can just sort of set up a loop and say, go and create me 100 identical contacts or contact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do things like if you're wanting to check some configuration data is in the expected state, you can say check if this record exists, and if it doesn't, go and create it rather than just always creating new ones each time. So you can build up a bunch of scripts that you can just run now, I think, a lot more easily.
Are these out of the box scripting, like SQL scripting statements and stuff, or is there something special you have to do for these things? I don't think I've ever ran a for loop in a SQL state, or at least not this decade. Maybe before I started doing CRM work, I just don't remember what it was.
I mean, it's absolutely standard SQL syntax from SQL Server. It uses, I don't know if it's actually the same parser, but it's certainly a Microsoft provided parser library. So all the syntax that you use in SQL for CDS is completely valid SQL Server syntax as well.
Cool.
So I mean, it's not something that I do an awful lot sort of day to day, but it's one of those things that when it's useful, then that's pretty much the only option that you got for it. The main thing probably there is being able to use variables. So to make your script reusable, you can stick a bunch of variables at the top and make sure that everything's changed in one place. And as I say, sort of capturing that unique identity. So when you go and add an account, you need to know what its account ID is to be able to use that when you go and create the contact.
Is it using cursors to do that? Is it using the cursor mechanism to iterate over?
No, so cursors is something that I haven't done yet, again, although that's probably not going to stick in my head, so thank you for that. But no, you can do
I'm not saying anything else.
So yeah, it's a for loop. So for 1 to 100, go and create a contact and keep incrementing your variables, things like that. So a cursor is more looping over data that's already in your data and doing something on it, whereas that's just working with integer variables or string variables.
That's very cool, though. The fact that you've implemented that for loop and variables, and that's really clever stuff. I mean, for anybody thinking, oh, it's just well, how hard can that be? I mean, what you're really doing is you are really implementing a parser. Obviously the parser does the simple syntax, giving you the tokens and stuff, but it's not giving you very much more than that, right? You have to then manage everything else.
Yeah, it gives you no intelligence about how to run it or what it all really means. It says there's a name here. Someone said account, or someone said name or full name or whatever. It gives you no context to it. So that's the tool's got to work all that out. And then if the for loop has got a condition on it for how many times to run it, so that you've got to figure out how to run that, how to rerun it on every loop.
It's kind of like I was testing my my daughter on her French homework. And so it's like I was the parser because I was reading this French, and literally my French knowledge is so limited, and I was reading off the French in my real broken French accent. I literally knew very little other than how to speak and some basic pronunciation. And then she was doing all of the hard work. So, it's kind of like I was that parser, and then she was the one that had to then go and then she fed something back to me. And then I went, okay, well, that kind of matches what's on the answer to that. So I'll go, yeah, I got it right.
I've been reading Harry Potter to my kids, and they have a high standard, so I have to kind of try to match the accents from the movies.
Oh, you got to do the voices.
And so now we're in the Goblet of Fire, and so I've got to do a French accent. And I think the other one's German. I haven't watched the movie yet, even, but and so I'm trying to keep them all straight, and I'm failing sometimes, and they're like, "No, that's not their guy's voice." I was like, "I'm doing the best I can, kids." But yeah.
Harsh critics.
So I mean, how do you do that? I mean, how did you implement the variables and the for loops and stuff once you got it from the parser?
So everything eventually boils down to gotos. Yeah, I know.
Sorry, I should have laughed.
But gotos is one of the other ones that you can do in there. So I had to implement gotos anyway, just because I just started going through the SQL documentation saying, yeah, I can do that one, I can do that one, I can do that one. And if I forgot to do gotos, then I might as well reuse the logic to do for loops as well. So it's everything becomes like a go-to with a condition, which I suppose when you boil down to it far enough, that's what a lot of code really is. It's a check if something's equal to something else and do a jump when you and you get down to all the what does C# really mean. It's basically what it's all doing. Everything's enough if statements.
So everything boils down to gotos. You heard it here first. Yeah. that's a quote worthy thing. That is definitely. Mark Carrington. Everything boils down to gotos.
Did you have to do work to get the plan, the execution plan to work as well? Because I was doing some statements like, holy cow, he's giving the whole SQL execution plan. Was that something given to you, or did you actually put effort into
that's
creating that?
I've had to build, yeah. So so behind the scenes, it builds up the plan kind of as you can think of it as like a DOM in memory for an HTML page or something like that. But it's basically the same sort of thing. Everything's just got. You start off with a select, and then where's that pulling its data from? It's pulling its data from a filter statement, which comes from the where, which gets its data from ultimately the tables with a fetch XML. And then having to actually present that graphically was more, as much as anything, just for me to be able to debug what was going on as I was building it. But I might as well try and make it look all nice and SQL Server.
Yeah, And I was like, holy, this looks pretty much exactly like SQL Server would look.
Don't look too closely at where the icons came from.
Probably. So in the not the honor, I guess maybe in honor of Jonas and his approach to calling out issues with stuff whenever people come on the show. I ran into 2 issues recently, and I don't know if these are known issues or not, but one is the coloring when I have 2 tabs open, like will switch. And so like if I want to have one in one environment, one in another environment, and I color those environments differently, for some reason, I don't know if it's an XRM Toolbox or if it's just the SQL for CDS, it will switch the colors. And so they're both the same color, even though I'm actually hitting different environments. So I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I don't use the coloring generally. So
okay.
Yeah,
all right.
I haven't looked at
but you use the execution plan. So all right. All right. You do what you need to do, I guess, there. And then the other issue, it just started, I think I did an update recently, is now if I do like a delete, it asks me like 6 times if you're sure you want to delete. Or if you do an update, it asks me 6 times. So it's like you're batching those off and then asking for each batch or something. So is that something you've seen before?
Nope, but I'll check that one out too. So just one update. Right. We'll...
So this is Daryl's help desk corner here.
Yeah.
This portion of the episode is sponsored by Daryl's having a problem and complaining to someone who's getting him something for free.
but then Mark, what you say in reply is, "What's your issue number, Daryl?"
Yeah. Yeah. Have you put it as an issue on GitHub?
Yes. No. Well, yes. No. I was going to ask first. I'll go through and I'll give some screenshots and I'll do some GIFs and it'll be great. I'll go do that. Cool. I just didn't want to make sure it wasn't something you heard before. And hey, Daryl, you need to download the newest version or something. So.
No, you knew I was coming on, so you've already downloaded it and had to play with it, right?
I do it all the day.
Maybe. Yeah. One of the things that you put in your email was a little code snippet, which was really quite interesting, which was showing using ADO.NET to connect to the SQLs for CDS.
Yeah, so that kind of really grew out of, in previous versions, you could run a bunch of commands at once. You could run an update, a select, another select, whatever. So it would convert it into one of these execution plans for each one. And if you were calling that from your own code, you could do that, but it would just give you a list of things you needed to call execute on, and you would loop over it and do it. And that was quite easy. And I would do that in the XRM Toolbox tool. And I've also got a version that does the same thing within SQL Server Management Studio. So you can do update statements in there as well if you're connecting to the TDS endpoint. But as soon as I started putting loops in, that calling code has got a lot more responsibility. I've just executed the goto statement basically, and I now need to jump somewhere else. I'm not just looping through it. So that calling code has got to do a lot more work to figure out what to do next. So I've already got 2 things to do that. I need to do that for the XRM Toolbox tool. I need to do that for the SSMS tool. I don't want to do that twice. So what do I know that, how something that runs SQL commands? There's a way of doing that in .NET, and it's called ADO.NET. So I started wrapping all this up. So hopefully now it's a lot easier for everyone else as well to integrate that in their own applications, because I've already done it in those 2. So yeah, now you can create a SQL for CDS connection in the same way that you can create a SQL connection. So, and it should look really exactly the same. So if you want to get some data out or do some update statements or whatever against Dynamics, against Dataverse from a C# application, rather than having to write all the longhand query expressions and update requests and everything, then yeah, you can just create a SQL for CDS connection, create a command, put some SQL in, and execute it exactly as if it was a SQL database, hopefully. And then that works quite nicely with the variable stuff, because then you can pass those through as parameters in exactly the same way as you would with SQL Server as well. So that all kind of ties in quite nicely with that same sort of set of updates.
It's very powerful, because the abstraction that it creates means that it does open up a lot of opportunities to create some quite complex logic that would be, if you were going to write it in C#, it would be, it would be fairly complex stuff.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot more long-winded.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think if you compared the code, I don't know if you've done this, but if you compared the code, the C# code to do a set of data operations with like loops and variables and all those kind of stuff to the SQL, I think, SQL has got a much, much higher density of information in its code, and therefore, you're a lot less code, a lot easier to follow, perhaps a lot easier to have a surface area to look at. I mean, the thing that sprung to mind for me was I've got a lot of unit tests that are written in C#, integration tests that are written in C# that actually connect directly to a Dataverse instance and then do various different things, set up test data and then execute certain things and then check that data has actually been affected correctly and then tidy up afterwards. It was almost, I was thinking, well, actually, would it be easier just to create a load of scripts, SQL scripts, to kind of do those tests? So you can, because I've done SQL development, pure SQL development in the past, and you can create your unit tests inside SQL. And there's various libraries to allow you to run a set of unit tests inside a SQL database. So it's kind of like that kind of thing struck me as a potential real low-hanging fruit for using it.
I think this idea of just applying a sort of a set of known config data, going off and creating a bunch of test accounts and contacts and importing them and copying things from one environment to another, things like that, things that you have to do regularly on sort of ALM processes for the config data, but also, say just resetting an environment for running another set of acceptance tests.
But could you use it? So, for example, let's say you had a plugin that was running registered on a particular, like an account. Could you then use it to say, create an account, perform an action on it, and then check that the plugin has made various different pieces of data, created child records or whatever? Could you use it like that to pass a unit test based on the SQL?
You could certainly get it to get the data out of it, ready for your unit test to check whatever it is you want to check, I guess. One of the things that I haven't done yet, and again, thank you, is in the whole sort of flow control, you got loops, you got ifs, you got gotos, you also got try, catch, and raise error, which I haven't done yet. But yeah, you could potentially then actually get the SQL script to fail if it finds something wrong.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah, exactly. Because then really everything works. Then fine, move on to the next one. And the density, I think that's the key, is that the density of the integration test will be quite small compared to the C#, which is sometimes hard to maintain, and then people may, not necessarily keep it up to date, or maybe even discourage people from writing them in the first place. But if you can, you've got a much simpler set of scripts.
Yes, I mean, if you've got sort of 20 lines of code to write to, just build up the query and then execute it, and then make sure you handle all the paging and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is something that's really easy to forget sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Then, if you can write that as a 2-line select statement.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely lots of opportunities. But yeah, it's I mean, I don't know, maybe some of our listeners have got ideas for how they might use the ADO connector. I mean, it's almost like, you're going back to the days of building client applications to connect to. I'm guessing you don't see it as used for anything like that. No one's going to be creating some sort of, client application that runs locally to use and using the ADO connector.
I'm thinking more sort of data integration type scenarios. I've built so many things over the years where, you get a message from the website to say that, someone's just registered or filled out a contact form, and you need to go and, does that person already exist, and go and create kind of these kind of marketing automation type scenarios. Maybe people that they don't want to go and shell out a massive amount on a ready built marketing automation thing just for a contact form. You can go and again, does that contact already exist? No one there with that email address. Go and create them.
But most importantly, can you connect to it using Access?
Yeah, we're not going to go there.
I see it being useful for devs that aren't CRM, know nothing about Dataverse and nothing about the interface, and being able to just quickly go through and do some ADO stuff just to grab some data or update some data or whatever, and not have to learn the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think I don't know how many people are out there that know all the ins and outs of query expressions and fetch XML and everything compared to the people that know SQL. And I imagine it's a massive skew towards people that know SQL and have never even heard of Dataverse. And yeah, so once you can pick up fetch XML and stuff, it's not that hard, but the amount of little oddities that I've had to kind of build in an understanding of in SQL for CDS, things like paging and all that sort of stuff, and the different more like application specific data types, or I'm not going to get a decimal value, I'm going to get a money value, and I've got to go and try and extract the value out of it, and all these sort of little bits and pieces that we're kind of used to after doing it for 10 years, but a regular SQL developers, it's not going to be on their radar, and it's all going to be a bit frustrating. So yeah, the idea is it's kind of a much lower barrier to entry for those sorts of people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the idea of just people being able to administrate data using SQL, I think it's a very attractive one. You're just doing very small things and not having to worry about getting into the complexities of how Dataverse works. I think that's a very good story. Because I think a lot of people get dumped into that role. Well, not dumped necessarily, but like they just find themselves in trying to maintain a CRM instance or just a Dataverse instance because it's being categorized in the same way as maybe a SQL database has, because it stores data, right? It must be the same thing.
It's got data in the name, so yeah. So
it must be.
So yeah, why not be able to think about it like that? Because essentially it's a data store with some extra stuff layered on top of it, but it is absolutely a data store.
It's almost like it's a common data service.
Yeah, someone should really market that.
Don't go there.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the day here where where both of us take some of our more well-known tools and rename them to match marketing standards for Microsoft. Either of us have yet to do that. Mark, with your SQL for CDS and all my other stuff that I do for C# stuff, it's all XRM. None of it's switched over to Dataverse anything really. So
yeah, I think XRM Toolbox is here to stay. I don't think we're going to have Dataverse Toolbox.
No, I don't think so either.
So yeah, so
it's kind of like de facto, isn't it? It's just the way it is.
Yeah, that must be confusing for new people coming in though, because why would they even think that XRM Toolbox has anything to do with this Dataverse thing they've just started using?
Yeah.
Or like for me on my project, they labeled everything CRM, including all the stuff that's not CRM, but it's part of the data migration process. And so they have all these like Azure CRM stuff that I'm like, this is Cosmos. This is not CRM. Why do we call this Cosmos database CRM? Just because it's CRM is utilizing it, this does not mean that it's CRM. And so we were running into issues where our UAT environment was pointed to Cosmos environment was pointed to a QA CRM environment, and everyone's like, "Why are all these names stored? Why this is CRM QA and UAT?" Like, well, someone named the thing wrong, man. Naming things is the hardest thing in computer science outside of what is off by one errors and cache invalidation. There we go. Yeah, two hardest things. Right?
So I had a question about the TDS endpoint, because I know last time we talked about the TDS endpoint quite a bit. And how you had to sort of have this hybrid mode, and you could use the TDS endpoint to do certain things, and you couldn't to do others. I mean, given that now it's so much more than just running SQL statements against Dataverse. You've got the ability to pass query. You've got the execution plan. You've also got the variables and the for loops and all of that kind of stuff, and parameters and your ADO.NET connector, all that. Do you think that the TDS endpoint is really giving you any value over and above, just simply being an alternative way of doing the read-only stuff?
So where it really is useful is for some of the, especially filters and joins that you can't do in fetch XML. So if you want to join, I don't know, accounts to contacts and find contacts that have got the same name as the account, is a thing we see is a reasonably common sort of data quality problem, where people, they don't know the guy's name, they just know that he's the important person at the company, so he gets the company's name on the record, something like that. You can't do that in fetch XML. So the only way I can do that without using TDS endpoint is to pull in the entire list of accounts and all the list of contacts, join them together in memory, and then filter them out. Which it works, but it's nowhere near as efficient as what SQL Server can do if you can pass it after that, because then all that data doesn't have to travel the network, doesn't have to land up in memory of your little workstation. It's all being handled where the data actually sits. So for that sort of thing, it can do things that it's just not going to be possible outside of with any other tool.
I didn't fetch XML get that some of that added, because they added some of the join capabilities, didn't they, to be able to join based on a value other than, and so where you can create like parameters to compare it against.
Yeah, so you can compare one field against another, but you can only do it within the same entity. So in that example, you could find contacts where the first name is the same as the last name, but you couldn't find contacts where some of the data matches some data in a related record.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's plenty of other examples as well where you're joining things on maybe not just a simple equals lookup on one field. You might want to join on multiple fields. You might want to join on one field is like another field, but not necessarily equals. Things like that. So all those sorts of things. The only way of doing it outside of that is to just pull everything in.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? The fact that SQL, the TDS endpoint now is giving more functionality than fetch XML in terms of the flexibility.
So I think it's still got a little way to go. For some reason, you can't access all the entities in there. I mean, there's some I can understand. So there's virtual entities. Maybe at some point they could be added in, but I think the way TDS endpoint works at the moment, from what I can sort of piece together, is that you send it a query, it gets a little bit rewritten, and then it actually gets passed down to the SQL database that's behind the scenes in Dataverse. But obviously there's all these other storage mechanisms there. So there's tables that are stored in blob storage, there's tables that are stored in Cosmos DB log storage, and then there's all the virtual ones that could be anywhere. So anything that's not in the SQL database is going to be off limits for TDS endpoint. But there's other ones as well that are in the SQL database that, for whatever reason, aren't accessible, and they tend to be kind of configuration-y type ones. So maybe that it's TDS endpoint is designed for reporting through Power BI. Maybe they just don't want to confuse report writers or something like that. But it does mean if you want to do these little ad hoc queries, say, give me the configuration for my UAT system so I can pull that out and then push it into my prod system. It's just not there. And a lot of the work I do day to day is around configuration stuff, much more than, I can pull account data quite easily. But I want to access the string map table, or as Daryl was saying, the list of plugin steps. I want to be able to use those. They're just not there in TDS endpoint. So maybe that's a switch they could flip on in the future. I'm not sure, but if you're wanting to do those more complex manipulation of account, contact, whatever data, I think TDS endpoint is really very strong on that. But there are still these limitations on there, which thankfully makes SQL for CDS still relevant.
So that's where your tool really provides that kind of level up, that higher level abstraction, and allows you just to have one way of interacting that doesn't matter really what the limitations are of the various different ways of interacting with the data, which I think, and you mentioned at the beginning, it's like, this is the third time we've had you on. Well, there's no surprise there, because it's I think everyone is excited about the possibility to have one way of interacting with data that doesn't have the limitations of all these little different, well, if you use fetch, you can't do this. If you use TDS, you can't do that. If you use a query expression, you can't do this. To me, that's the marvelous thing about this.
No cliffs, huh?
There's a bit of work gone into this one to say, I want to use the TDS endpoint more where it can, because it can handle all these things that fetch can't. But equally, in previous versions, it's just been a toggle to say, I want to use TDS for everything, and then you'll get some errors when you try and access tables that it doesn't support, or I don't want to use it at all. Now it tries to be a bit more intelligent. Say, it looks at the query and says, is that accessing tables that TDS endpoint supports? Is it using only bits of the SQL language that it supports? And if not, then it will just automatically fall back to using fetch and its own processing. So you can take advantage of everything that TDS does a lot more without having to think yourself, oh, should I turn that option on or not? Because as I was investigating all these new bits that I want to do, trying to figure out how much of it TDS actually supports. So you can do variables, but you can't do loops and things like this. So it's got a bit of work there to do up front to say, for each query, which way should it go?
Can you use it in SSIS? You tried connecting via SSIS?
No. Do people still use SSIS, or is everyone doing Data Factory these days?
No, definitely. I mean, especially the kind of those types of people who are administrating SQL databases, and they're kind of doing, because it's a part of SQL. SSIS is still a part of SQL Server, so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if you're cloud, then it's not necessarily ever going to be something you touch. But if a SQL Server is, especially on premises or even cloud SQL servers in combination, then it's going to be part of your tool set. And I think if you've got because you can connect to an ADO.NET using ADO.NET as a connection, so it's.
I guess it should be possible.
That'll be very interesting.
Yeah, because. At the moment, I've got this plugin for SSMS, so you can run queries in there now. So in previous versions, it just had looked to say, are you running an update statement or an insert statement? And if so, it would run it for you. If you were doing a select, it would just let the TDS endpoint do its thing. Now, again, it looks to say, is this something that the TDS endpoint can't support, and it should do it itself? And then it runs it through that same ADO.NET provider, and then trying to present that back to the grid in SSMS in a way that it support. So it's enough of a compliant ADO.NET provider for the SSMS grid and everything to work with it. So I'd expect it to work if you can just point SSIS at any old provider. I guess you have to install it on the server, but it should still work.
Yeah, interesting.
I feel like sometimes Scott gets into the non-encouraging dad situation here. Like, oh, you did this, but can it do this? Like, that's nice, but can it do? Like, you're just not quite good enough. Oh, but you could do this.
No, don't say that. No, I
you won that
back.
game, but you could have not fumbled the ball there.
I take it all back. I take it all back. I mean, I'm just literally excited about the possibilities. I mean,
I've got so many things I still want to add to it already. I've already got another branch going with other bits that just. There's so much more SQL syntax that I just want to keep adding to it. I mean, most of it I've probably got no day-to-day reason for doing, but I've just gone down a rabbit hole at this point. So I'm just sort of going through the SQL Server T-SQL documentation saying, oh, I could do that bit, I could do that bit.
I feel like you've done the work of like 10 developers already.
Yeah,
like,
I was thinking
let's see, if I was going to do that, how much time would it take me? I'm like, I've got 3 kids and a full-time job. I don't have time for that. But apparently, that's not an issue that Mark finds with himself, and he just does it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that once you just something that just keeps nagging at you, sort of, in the shower, it's like, oh, I think that sounds too hard. No, there's a way of doing that. I'm sure there's a way of doing that. And then sometimes at work, it'll come up with like, it would be actually really useful for this thing that I'm working on now to be able to run that query. So yeah, thankfully I can spend a bit of time at work doing that sort of stuff as well, because it's all nicely justifiable. But a lot of it's just pure bloody mindedness, I think, to say this has got to be possible.
Well, it's doing something right.
So as this thing escapes its XRM Toolbox heritage, does that mean there's a different NuGet package to install if you just want to use it for like ADO stuff, or is it still like the same thing, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, so there's the main package for the XRM Toolbox tool. There's a package which is just the ADO.NET provider and the engine. Mark npm.SQL for CDS.engine. There's one that does just a conversion from fetch XML to SQL for people that start off, they want to go the other way around. So that's for things like fetch XML builder. You can build up your fetch XML and then convert it to view as SQL.
That would be really helpful for devs that don't know fetch XML. And like, what is all this stuff? And then you throw it in there and say, oh, this is the SQL. Okay, I mean that'd be a very helpful little tool for them.
And then the SSMS plugin. So yeah, there's one code base, but I think four things that I publish off that now.
Awesome.
So, yeah, the SSMS plugin is interesting to try and build, because it's not built to be extended on. I think SSMS there's an awful lot of trying to figure things out by trial and error. How do you add a button in there, and how do you get that to get the selected SQL, and how do you get the pane at the bottom to actually show the results? You can poke through the code there, and there's an awful lot of finding private fields through reflection. As long as they don't go renaming anything in another version, because
that's always fun. That's where you need to put your white flag of surrender in there. Please don't ever change these private things. I'm depending them. Which on most developers' black background is a black flag, but anyway, it's an ASCII flag there. So, well, Mark, if you keep on making all these edits and stuff, rather than just having like a full episode, maybe we'll have to have like a little like a SQL for CDS chat, like on a quarterly basis, just to see.
Yeah, just sort of 15 minutes.
Mark comes on and talks to us about what new changes he has here, because you never seem to put it down, man. Too much shower time, too much time to think.
Apparently.
You got to stop having those showers, Mark.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I can bill for an hour of me sitting at my computer thinking through how to do something and not getting it right, but I can't bill for the 10-minute shower where I actually sat through and I'm like, oh yeah, this is how it works. It's just
it looks weird on the bill.
Yeah, it looks weird. Yeah. Shower, 15 minutes. What? So anyway, that's a funny thing to think about, I guess. So, anything else, Mark, that you've done on it, or are we gonna? We'll have to wait till the next time that you come on and tell about all the changes you've made.
So, I think that's all I can say for the moment for SQL for CDS. So I'll keep a few bits under my hat for next time.
Okay.
Yeah. So a few other bits I've been working on. What else are we doing? .NET Core connector for on-prem databases. On-prem CRM instances.
All right. Is that a branch off of the Microsoft stuff, or is that your own custom stuff?
So the
fork.
Microsoft have published for a little while now the new Dataverse Connector. So that's .NET Framework and .NET Core friendly, but one of the restrictions, at least originally, was that it only supported OAuth authentication. And we connect to a lot of different customers' instances at data rate, and a lot of them are online these days, but we've still got a fair proportion of on-prem customers. And I think when I went through and had a look, I think one of them had OAuth configured on their ADFS. So if we were to move forward with porting all our stuff to .NET Core, which obviously we want to do, we wouldn't be able to connect to their instances and process their data anymore, which is obviously not very good. So I think it's actually one of the most requested or most commented on issues on that GitHub repo is people saying, can we do Windows authentication? Can we do username and password authentication against ADFS? And, it didn't look like that was coming. So I'd actually been doing some other work recently on porting other things to .NET Core and doing a lot of low-level stuff with SOAP to keep backwards compatibility with some web services we do. So I'll give that a go. So yeah, I ended up writing an I organization service implementation on WCF and getting that to work with ADFS for internet-facing deployments. And then again, it's one of these things where I get a little too into it and probably take it a bit further than I should, and then end up writing a sort of properly low-level thing working with Windows authentication APIs to do all that to people that don't have ADFS either. So yeah, there's a package out there now, data8.powerplatform.dataverse client, I think it's called, which is builds on top of that Microsoft one, uses all the same interfaces, same types, but provides you an option to authenticate with Windows authentication for your on-prem stuff.
Man,
nice.
I think I'm like talking to Mark to make you feel lazy, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna. Yeah, we do nothing, Daryl. Literally, we do.
It's like, why do we even bother?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go sit in the garden. I think just drink a beer.
Go look at my chickens. Yeah. Glad they're not ducks. Well, Mark, wow, well, tons of work, ultra impressive, from one dev to another, yeah, keep up the good work. I don't have an immediate use for half that stuff, but I could see myself having an immediate use or a use for that in the not too distant future. So I'm glad that I now know where it's at, know it's available, and I can lean on it when I need it. So big shout out for all those things. So yeah.
All right, thank you.
Well, Mark, if our listeners want to get a hold of you, give you other dad non-encouragements of, hey, you should do this, how can they best do that?
So I'm on Twitter at MarkMPN. You can get me on my blog, markcarrington.dev, or issues on the GitHub for anything SQL for CDS related. GitHub.com/MarkMPN again.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Scott, that's how our listeners can get hold of our guests. How can our listeners get hold of us?
I don't know if I'm going to answer you, Daryl. I'm just still sulking about you calling me a non-encouraging dad.
I said you were approaching non-encouraging dad levels.
Oh, that makes it all the better.
That's a distinction my 7-year-old would say to me. And like, I didn't say you were mean. I'm saying you looked like you're being mean. I'm like, oh, big difference. Way to go. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. Well, if you want to email us and tell me how I'm not being a non-encouraging dad, and I'm just being positive and encouraging to Mark, you can feel free to email us at cast@xrmtoolbox.com or on social media @xrmtoolcast. We'd love to hear from you.
A special shout out to Phil Cole that commented on our YouTube video this last week. We don't get a whole lot of comments, and say, hey, great job. So thanks, Phil.
Thanks for listening, Phil. Yeah,
keep listening. So
that's right, four listeners now.
Yeah, we'll almost run out of fingers here. We keep on going.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mark, pleasure talking to you. Hope you have a good one. Hope you continue to somehow find time to do all this stuff, because it's pretty impressive and it's great to see. So
look forward to seeing you the next time, Mark, because I'm sure there will be a next time.
CDS episode 4.
A compendium.
Yeah.
He'll have it working on a Raspberry Pi and having like some sort of like audio interface to it, and so you just like speak and it gives you that's something like that. I can see that.
Yeah, I'll get working on
that. All right. Talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Cheers then.
Bye.
This has been the XRM Toolcast with Daryl and Scott Durrell. Produced by Lin Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @xrmtoolcast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XRM Toolcast page.